I just want to start by thanking everybody for coming to this early panel and for the organizers of the conference and the moderator, Diego, for organizing the panel. So today I'll be talking about two films. One's México de mi corazón, Dos Mexicanas en Mexico, translated as Mexico of my heart, Two Mexican Women in Mexico, from 1963, directed by Miguel M. Delgado, and Del otro lado del Puente, from the other side of the bridge, from 1978, directed by Gonzalo Martinez Ortega. In this presentation, I will use these two Mexican films, which both feature Pocha or Pocho characters, to trace changing representations of feminized Mexican Americans living in Los Angeles before and after the Chicano Civil Rights Movement. And while I do not have sufficient time today to really go over it, I just want to say that both these films belong to popular film genres, and as such provide pretty rich examples for exploring the connections between cultural hegemony, fantasy, and citizenship. So to provide a little quick context, my larger project is called Marquee Survivals, and it focuses on repurposed movie theaters, mostly located in downtown Los Angeles, specifically on South Broadway. And with this project, I'm working toward an alternative media historiography of that street, and to some extent, the historic district of downtown Los Angeles. So, while the majority of the majority of México de mi corazón is set in Mexico, the film actually advertised itself as the first great Mexican movie filmed in Los Angeles and the beautiful places in Mexico City. El otro lado del Puente, on the other hand, takes place entirely in Los Angeles, using East LA as well as UCLA and USC's campuses as backdrop. So, just for a little clarification, in this presentation I will be using Pocha perhaps more generally than it's commonly understood. On its own, Pocha or Pocho is a highly contested designation used to signify alignment with American cultural values, and the word has previously been synonymous with agringada, meaning something like Americanized. And it's shifted in intensity as an insult throughout Mexican-American history, from something that's denigration to something that's been reclaimed like Chicano. Rather than simply taken to mean American-born or Americanized, I'm using the label to consider a feminized Mexican-American belonging, or on the other side of the spectrum, an alienation, as depicted in these particular films. So therefore, in this presentation, I'm interested in the construction of its meaning in relation to the historical periods during and after World War II, and during the Chicano movement in the late 1960s and 70s, and also how it resonates specifically in Los Angeles. So I'm not as much concerned with other historical periods or regional contexts. So broadly, I'm interested in expanding Pocha beyond a description of failed Mexicanness by exploring its history as a feminized state of transnational identity. Okay, that's that. And I don't have time to talk about Lucha Vida, even though if we want to talk about her afterwards, that'd be great, because she's amazing and kind of the crux of this whole presentation. So, México de mi corazón is a musical romantic comedy about two Pocha cousins, Lupe and Maria, played by ranchera singers Lola Beltran and Lucha Vida, who return to Mexico. Despite being a nationalistic film, like I said, enamored with Mexico City, the film actually begins in Los Angeles. And the film's opening locates this city as a center of the glamorous world of cinema, which is described in the film's voiceover as one of the greatest dreams created by man. It goes on to explain this is the city of Los Angeles, where dreams and golden fantasies are made. Throughout the film, México de mi corazón, it offers a unique interpretation of this Angelino dream. Ultimately, it adjusts focus away from the entertainment industry of Los Angeles and toward the Mexican world, whose members the film narrates feel an irreplaceable love for their Mexico. So, the two main characters desire more than fame and celebrity at homecoming, and this is shown in their journey in Los Angeles. You know, this shot, it makes me want to cry. They're singing Canción Azteca at the $1 Million Theater, where they win a singing contest. And this dream that they have of returning home is cinematically realized as they are awarded a trip from the singing contest. From the start of their return to an unfamiliar country of origin, the two cousins are effusive in their deep respect and love for Mexico, eagerly singing Soy Puro Mexicano, I am pure Mexican, on their drive through Los Angeles freeways en route to the airport. The cousins embark on a journey that will fill the golden fantasies of national reunion. So the film indulges such a fantasy, a return to Mexico that is completely absent of rejection and ridicule. Villa and Beltran, as Pochas, will experience no problems, obviously, returning to a homeland, but the characters have never visited before. And their reunion with Mexico becomes the film's actual love story, the true love story. So intense is the main character's love for Mexico that the individual love stories pale in comparison. And here they're shown in these different kind of romantic scenarios. Even as the formation and security of those heterosexual relationships predicate the cousin couple's authentic return to their true beloved, Mexico. As David Maciel puts in his essay, Pocha is another experience in Mexican cinema, this inherent strength of the cousin's admiration for Mexico is the film's main problem. Portrayed by popular ranchera singers, as I mentioned before, the actresses playing Lupe and Maria are well known to be Mexican and represent their Pocha-ness through the occasional use of Spanglish and American English slang. As superficial linguistic markers of difference, these gestures toward Pochismo hardly begin to demonstrate the complexity of transnational citizenship negotiated by Mexican-American women in any historical period. The utterances of okay, thank you familia, and cara de gangster instead appear as pretense, used to create a shallow depiction of the Pocha, only to show how quickly she can be reintegrated into Mexican nationalism. Okay, so moving on to the next film, Otro, lado. This movie was released the same year as Arturo Ripstein's critically acclaimed Lugar Sin Límites, Place Without Limits. And that award-winning drama also features Lucha Villa, who plays La Japonesa, a well-known madam of a brothel in the Mexican countryside. However, Ripstein's film received a lot of attention. It's one of the great films of Mexican cinema, and Del Otro Lado received a lot less, and continues to receive a lot less. Partly because it belongs to the genre of border exploitation films, and is kind of just a vehicle for the film's star, Juan Gabriel, who's an illustrious singer and composer in Mexico. And accordingly includes many musical numbers, a couple of which are disco, to showcase his talent. Right? So I'll put Del Otro Lado in dialogue with México de mi corazón in this discussion of the Pocha, and I do that because it resembles and diverges from the plotline of that more optimistic film in revealing ways. And in those differences, one can perceive the influence of the Chicano civil rights movement. The fantasy of returning wholeheartedly to a welcoming motherland as a tourist who's in her heart puro mexicana is deflated. Del Otro Lado reveals the true home of the Chicano to be the southwestern United States, or implicitly Azatlan. For my analysis today, what's especially significant for that depiction of Chicano ideals is how it reshapes and reframes history, and how this intersects with representation of Pocha mother as violated mother. In Del Otro Lado, the main character, Alberto Molina, played by Gabriel, discovers that he is not in fact Mexican, he's Chicano. So this is like a traumatic discovery for him, something that he has to take the whole film to kind of recover from. He reacts with horror and rejects the name of Chicano. He wants to return to Juarez, his hometown, and along with it a certain security in his Mexicanness. But ultimately, Berto accepts his Chicano family past, and the politically engaged present is taking place in 1979. It's a little late, but it's still being depicted in this film. And he remains in Los Angeles specifically as an activist to empower and support the Chicano community. And while Berto's decision to stay in Los Angeles is a conscious one that he arrives at through deliberation throughout the film, and the narrative arc serves that, the role of the Pocha and her agency is far more circumscribed. What would happen if we would center her representation in her utterances? For one, we would note that the film relies on familiar female stereotypes to develop its Chicana characters. Estela, the one on the top, is Berto's love interest. She's a young innocent woman studying social work at USC, and she represents the virgin. She spouts the rhetoric of Chicano nationalism, as do many of the film's Chicano characters who are not Berto, and saves Berto from a romantic relationship with a vilified white Steve from Bel Air. Estela also pushes Berto in his conversion to Chicanismo, and for instance, at one point she reassures him that in Los Angeles, estamos en Mexico, we are in Mexico. On the other hand, Berto's mother, played by Villa, represents the poor, or some variation of La Malinche, La Chingada, the conquered, or the lunatic fucked one. Through a confession from Berto's older brother, Danny, dramatic hidden family history is revealed. Berto learns that his mother performed sex work so that she could support her family while her husband was serving in the U.S. Armed Forces during World War II. And Berto also learns that upon returning from service, his father discovered this and plunged deep into alcoholism, as he was unable to cope with the knowledge of his wife's enterprising deeds. The Molina patriarch ends up dead in El Downtown, while La Madre suffers a far worse fate, now brain dead in a convalescent home. You see that in the second image. Catatonic and mute, as La Madre Villa can only sing now to her child within her own memories. And however, even in her flashback, she's denied subjectivity, as the scene is shown through the point of view of the son. And we can see the short clip.
Mama. Mamacita. Estoy contento. Mamá. Mamacita. Mamacita. Estoy contento, mamá. Mamá. Mamá.
She's singing Nunca, Nunca, Nunca. He's basically just saying that, I'm your son Alberto, and trying to convince her of his identity as her son, but she's not able to recognize that. He's devastated. With Villa rendered speechless, the film perhaps unintentionally highlights the silencing of Pachucas, Pochas, and Chicanas that many have accused the Chicano movement of the 1960s and 70s of reproducing. However, there's hope for tracing the contours and textures of the silence in the work of scholars like Catherine S. Ramirez and Rosalinda Fregoso. In Ramirez's book, she reinscribes the Pachuca and the Chicana history, finding her images and stories even in the silence of neglected court transcripts. And Fregoso, at the end of her canonical book, The Bronze Screen, offers one glimpse of potential narrative for the underserved female protagonist, but devotes the entire book of Mexicana encounters to that, exploring the symbolic role of Mexicanas and Chicanos in culture and how that has historically intersected the making of social identities and the borderlands. So, in conclusion, in briefly analyzing these two films, I've only begun to consider representations of the Pocha and how they might reflect her historical relation to imaginative possibilities of agency, expression, and articulation, and furthermore, how these questions are connected to and determined by itinerant notions of Chicano mobility, hybridity, nationalisms, and transnationalisms. There are many questions left to explore, including how the role of fantasy in negotiating ethnic identities and histories intersects with sexuality. For México de mi Corazón, this fantasy is enacted through the cousins' freedom and mobility in choosing Mexico, but it's primarily based in their identification as heterosexual Mexican women. 15 years later, in the world of otro lado de Puente, a magical return to Mexico and the national family is no longer tenable. Mexican filmmakers used the Chicano movement to depict Los Angeles as Mexico. And while both films present fantasies of Chicano belonging, its availability on Del Otro Lado is tellingly dependent on the impurity of the violated mother. And it is from her sacrifice of her mind and body that the Chicano family can emerge. But what to do with the queer configuration of that family with Juan Gabriel as the patriarch, right? Gabriel being the same entertainer who Ramon Garcia has described as the Mexican George Michael and Liberace all rolled into one. This presents one compelling aspect that makes a text like Del Otro Lado de Puente, a low-budget film presenting a discouraging portrait of Pocha mobility, still worth researching further. Thank you.